Hello, everyone. This is Stephen McNallen with episode 3 of Gods, Folk, and Destiny. Tonight, climbing mountains and offering sacrifices to forbidden gods, strange shrines built in the wilderness by people unknown, and how to find your place in the shield wall when it's time to do warrior stuff. All of this and more. But first, let's take care of a few admin things we got to cover. If you like this programming, if you like the work we're doing here at Raffenfolk, if you like God's Folk and Destiny, go into Raffenfolk Network and hit that subscribe button. And then tell all your friends. We need to get more people in here because our job is to change the world. That's it. You know, this is not an amusement thing. I'm not getting rich off this. Nobody here's getting rich off of this. It's not an ego trip. We're here to make a difference. You can help us to do that. So get that subscription button hit, tell your friends, and if you haven't already read my book, Asatru, A Native European Spirituality, you might want to take a look at that. I think it's essential reading for the kind of stuff we do. You can get a copy of that with my signature and basically the notation of your choice from WolfAgeMedia at gmail.com. So there's that. So, meanwhile, let's get back to the action here. My producer tonight is the dauntless Dave Martell, manager of the program and Lord of the Airways, the Emperor of the Ether. And my guest is a most remarkable man named Will. That's Will as in triumph of thee. Will is a man I've known for years. He's a remarkable individual. He's an outdoorsman, an athlete, a philosopher, an activist in his own way, and I'm not ashamed to say, a warrior. So without further ado, here he is. Will, you with us tonight?
I am happy to be here, Elder McNallen.
Yeah, well, thanks for joining us. I know we had a lot of issues we had to overcome this week, and a lot of things we had to do in way of pulling strings and taking care of stuff, and you're here with us, and we're overcoming all the obstacles, and we're driving on. I'm really glad to have you with us. You know, like I was telling the folks out there, we've known each other for a number of years, and I think that they will agree by the end of this program that you have a lot to offer to them and to the rest of us in terms of not just your expertise, but your information, and perhaps most important of all, your attitude. So rather than jumping right into some of that stuff, let's kind of start off at the beginning. And would you just tell us a little bit about your background, how you came to Asatru, or heathenry, as some call it, or folkish Asatru, this thing is ours. How did you get here?
Well, I've always been a very spiritual person. I was raised in a very, very strong evangelical Christian home. Growing up in a small town with a smaller perspective on what the world was. Traveling and having opportunities to go overseas and be in certain parts of the world allowed me to broaden, very acutely broaden that perspective, sometimes not in ways I would have wanted or in manners I would have wanted, but I felt it was a necessity at the time. I gathered quite a bit of information in those periods of time. From there, I came home, and it had very thoroughly shattered my beliefs in the Abrahamic God and the philosophy and the concepts of the scripture and how they were based no longer felt that they really worked not only for the world today, but I started now looking at them with eyes that made me feel that they were not a thing that worked for me and who I was and who this new person was post these experiences. Spending several years in kind of a semi-spiritual, I guess one would, I guess the hip term for that these days is agnostic. And I began doing some research in my own background, into my own history, and into my own into the deeper root of who I was culturally speaking. And growing up, despite my very evangelical upbringing, I had always had a unique exposure to history, particularly the mythologies of the greater European, but particularly the Greek and the Scottish, and these, to a little bit of a lesser extent, the Norse mythologies, which was interesting because I took them as just being stories. Doing some more research into them, as I found that I had more connection to them, I guess a richer connection than I had thought, beyond the, oh, well, these who my family were, XYZ number of years back. When I began to realize that they had the unique culture all their own, they had unique spirituality all their own, I had a great a feeling of, oh wow, this connects to me. This is part of who I am. But I still had a hesitation, just because, mostly being of mixed European descent, I felt that, well, these are the quote unquote Viking gods. That's not me. I'm not Norse or Scandinavian, or I'm not Swedish. But when I began researching them more thoroughly, I realized, well, the Viking Age was such a small period. These were deities that were revered by our people for such a longer amount of time. In fact, the more research we do into it, the further back we realize that they've been there. And then when you start looking at the connections between them and how the Anglo-Saxons called Thor, had their name for Thor, how the Germanic and the mainland Germans had their name for Thor, how they had their name for Odin. Odin wasn't just Odin, it was Odin, Wotan, Woden, and it was to all these different, particularly Northern European, but still broadly Northern European peoples. And once I got over that hurdle, or both academic and I guess a beginning, an initial misconception that they belong to just this tiny subcontinent, if you will, of Europe, it really made me aware that if they were connected to that much of the broadly Northern Europe, perhaps there was connections between the Eastern Europeans and the Southern Europeans and the Western Europeans. So once I started researching the Druids and the Slavs and started seeing connections between all these different deities, not completely so between their respective pantheons of gods and goddesses, but when you start seeing very major similarities between a lot of the deities, you start realizing, well, there's a lot of common root here, a lot of common root. And if there's a common root to that, and I'm broadly connected to many of them, not all of them, obviously, but to many of them, I started realizing that, well, this is who I am. I don't need to be a 100% Swedish to feel connected to these archetypes, to these gods and goddesses. So once I guess I started connecting with them more on academic level, it started feeding more into the concept of them as spiritual and as philosophical and life archetypes for me. And that's where I really began to then take this further steps and go, this is something that I need to gather more information on. And I need to reach out to people who understand this greater than I do, because I can read these books and understand them through my eyes and mind, but I want other people's understanding of this. I want to reach out to experts on this. And that's when I started to come around. And that's, not too long after, I'm thankful to say, is when I started interacting and getting to meet people like yourself.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you did. I know that feeling that you have when you begin throwing out your old beliefs and kind of looking for something to replace it with, and finding this and finding that, and then trying to put the pieces together. And I would dare say that most of the people listening to this probably have been through that same experience. Did it take you very long to get from that first shock of disillusionment with the established religion to where you ended up with us? Was that a long procedure, or was it just a matter of months?
Oh, that was actually several years, just because the experiences abroad were very traumatic in nature, and so the great solace for me was, and I will speak more on this here later, was nature, because it's the one thing that started to make sense.
Right.
you go to a place where, and it's understandable, the world is not black and white, but when white is black and black is white and up is down and inside is out and the sky is green and the grass is blue, you stop believing, and you almost have run away with disbelief for anything. And the one thing that made sense was nature. So as to going back to nature for a long time was the period of I guess seeking solace, for lack of a better expression. But it was interesting because once I started learning more about our faith, it realized the portion of that nature, the role that nature plays in that, is so instrumental. When I discovered that, that part didn't come to me as new, because that had been a part of me for going way back, even beyond my disillusioned phase. It had always been a part of me. Nature and being an outdoorsman had always been a part of me. So when I found out that nature and the outdoors was such an intricate part of our faith, well, that made total sense. That's when things started clicking.
I see. So nature was a refuge. It was a spot of sanity in an otherwise chaotic universe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I understand that. I think a lot of people feel that way as well. And how have you followed up on that in recent years? I know that a lot of the things you've described to me inherently involve the outdoors or athletics or camping and all of that kind of stuff. So how have you followed through in ways that relate to your religious and your spiritual beliefs in regards to nature? I mean, I know you go out into the woods and you do some interesting things, I believe.
Well, one of the things, and I think what you're asking here is about, as far as with the prognation, for lack of a better expression, the spreading the word. I know that's a thing that isn't always encouraged amongst our circles, but as far as the way to actually try to get actually a message out without getting the message out, so to speak, when it comes to nature. And for me, nature is the great equalizer, the great balance. And without a concept of that in both in your own walk, you can become very lost, because nature is one of the few things that it'll bend to our will. But one only has to look at the flooding in the Midwest that's been going on, or the tornadoes that have been hitting, and to realize we don't have this harnessed the way we like to think. And that's a good thing, because it is beyond us. It is more powerful than us. It is a greater parameter than what we are. And we have a place in it. And if you don't respect that, it will teach you to respect it, unfortunately in ways that are going to be very severe.
Right. Nature wins, basically. Nature's laws. I mean, we talk a lot about that, and I think in Asatru we take that very seriously. We understand that nature has its powers, and sometimes we can personify those powers and this, that, and the other. But ultimately, it comes down to the hard calculus of the real world and cause and effect. And what you get is basically what you make, and your fate, how you manage to navigate in nature and succeed in nature and exist in nature, or in a world that involves nature, depends on your innate qualities rather than on asking for help or beseeching the powers that things be different than what they are. I mean, we have to obey nature's laws, but at least we're realistic enough to get an idea of what those laws are, to understand those laws, and to steer accordingly.
Agreed.
Yeah. So tell me about your propagation of folkish Asatru project. What's that all about?
Well, the inspiration for that came upon one of the online discussion sites where we had been. One member had spoke up. What about what about the spreading of Asatru? What about speaking about Asatru? And obviously, the reaction to that was pretty in favor of, well, this is not something we're interested in spreading. We're not Jehovah's Witnesses. We're not going to go knock on people's doors and be like, would you like to hear the word of Odin today? That's not how we are. That there is nothing about the lore. If you study it, you spend a lifetime studying it. And I don't claim to be a man who has the level of understanding that a man who would have spent his life studying, but I would be hard pressed to find anywhere that you would say, well, yes, you should go be a missionary of Odin. Having said that, one has to be realistic. If this is going to continue, it cannot be this cult that meets only every super blood moon, at from 2 a.m. till 3 a.m, and then doesn't reconvene for another 100 years. I'm being very hyperbolic, obviously, but if this is always going to be a super fringe element, the way the world is changing, it will not continue in its true state, because if you look around us, it's no longer being allowed to be kept as a fringe. So it has to reawaken, establish its own sovereignty, or it's going to be pushed into the abyss. One of the things I've always felt is that when I've been out in nature is when I've been closest and felt closest to the land, to a sense of peace, closest to the gods and goddesses and to my ancestors. And those are places I feel that it already connects to us on a spiritual level. We are the people of the sun. We are the people of the earth. We have a connection to this. If you go, I've spoken to several people in my own trips over to Europe. If you go there and you go back to these old forests, there is a connection there. If you go to the big mountains of here in the United States, be they on the east or western seaboards, you go to those places and you go far into the mountains, there is an awe about it, and it can speak to you as just a incredible, how incredible the powers of nature are, and it can speak to you, if you allow it, on an even deeper level than that. And one of the things that I took from this was that that's many of the places where I went to pray, to build my altars, and to make sacrifices and offerings, to pour out a horn of mead. And it worked on a dual level. It's somewhere I went to physically challenge myself, because you get up and you hike a good, if as little as 5 to as much as 20 miles. That's a good workout. You're getting a good workout in. You're getting in there. You're not just sweating away the fat of that burger and beer you had last Tuesday. You're getting in. You're sweating away the toxins of the air of the city, if you live in one, and away from the negativity of the environment that we are besieged in. And there is where you're shedding away from those things. You are being closer, and those are the places that more of our people go. For maybe not for the levels that we are going, but they're going there to nature. They're getting out. They're stepping away from the city. They're getting closer to nature. If you look at the demographic movement these days, more people are moving into cities now than there are living in the country. So but yet people are still hiking a lot. They're still seeking to get back out and still stay connected to nature. And that's I felt a unique opportunity for us. I was very inspired by your Wotan and the Peaks, because going up there, it already is a place that you'll find more of our people. So one day I decided, while up there building my altar, and it's not a extravagant thing. I always put a 9-stone altar together. That's my thing. Or when I've hiked in the snow, it's been a 9. I've made 9 snow, squares or you good?
Oh,
Little dry throat.
Excuse me. No, I'm sorry. I'm still dealing with my lung issues in the past few days. I'm going to very unobtrusively slip one of these cough drops in my mouth. I'm sorry, man. You were on a roll, and
that's okay.
I wasn't confident on how to mute my mic, and I was fumbling. I thought, oh crap, what am I going to do? So okay. So
hey, we were just talking about the mountains. This is a good moment for a ricula.
Okay, so we're in the mountains. It's a place that's or in the wilderness, it's a way that's the place is rejuvenating, where we can connect with both our inner selves and with the holy powers around us. And you go there, and you've built little altars, little
I built
sanctuaries.
altars.
What do you? Yeah, you with nine stones, right?
9 stones. I always
Right.
do 9 stones. The only time I've ever done 9 stone, I've kept to 9 stones, just because we distinctly know that number is associated with Wotan, so that's why I always stick to 9 stones. I've
Right.
carved, even when honoring other deities, I've always stuck to the 9 stone altar. That's just a personal thing. One of the things I decided was, because I always took my altars down and just buried them back in the earth. Or return them to the earth. But one day I decided, you know what? I was up on a trail. It was a absolutely beautiful, beautiful trail. There were snowpacks melting everywhere. So there was a giant waterfall nearby that was just flowing. And I had made 9. I had compacted 9, I guess, snowballs, for lack of a better expression. And I had built one as a face stone with a hollowed out eye. And I decided I didn't want to take that down. I was just going to leave it there. And I know I wasn't going to last forever, because, obviously things were melting, even if they were refreezing at night. And I just decided to leave it there. And I said, you know what? This is a trail that is not heavily trafficked, but there's a fair enough amount of people come up here. But to hike up above the falls where I had put this, I thought that's going to have to take someone who first is going to want to hike all the way out there in the snow, and then hike up above the falls, which is an additional challenging point. So I thought it's already going to be a person in the quality of people who are doing things out of the ordinary. Well, that kind of sounds like what we're doing. So I decided to leave it there, and I carved some runes into the snow, some rune stabs, and just using twigs, I spelled out "Hail Odin" and just put that at the bottom of the altar, and just left it there. So I thought,
Sweet.
if this person comes along, it's not going to be many people, but it doesn't need to be many people. They're going to look at that and go, unfortunately, the one thing we tend to find in nature, if we find any, besides footprints, is we find trash. And you'll find in many outdoors clubs, and you'll find, they try to use the motto, leave nothing but the footprints and leave no trace. But this is something that's different. It's made from nature, of nature, and by nature. There's nothing artificial or man-made from it. It's just man assembled. So I said right there, that's going to tell people right off the bat that this is something that's still respecting the sanctity of nature. And at the same time, it's telling people that there are people like you who come all the way out here, like you, who climb all the way up these peaks, or off into these, river valleys, or off along these streams, off these trails. And they're taking the time to do this. And this is where they come. This isn't something that you can just do online, or do in a fancy church in the city. This is somewhere where you have to make a sacrifice of yourself to come out here to do it. So that I said, that's going to speak to people, and do so in a way that still is being respectful of the sanctity of the environment around it.
I think that's really perceptive of you, and I think it's a good thing to do. I see utterly nothing wrong with that. And, maybe the person who comes along and sees it, maybe they're not there yet, but maybe a year from now, or 2 or 3 years from now, they'll keep maybe thinking back on that. And then someday the light comes on. You never know how an act of that sort is ultimately going to affect anyone, especially if there are people who are imaginative and thoughtful and inquiring, which, I think you're probably right, or you're kind of people you're more likely to get in a somewhat difficult outdoors or wilderness kind of environment. So I think it's great. I think along those same lines, we were having a conversation last week about how we sacralize our landscape. And we think back to, places in Europe that have been sacralized with, massive energy, so to speak, for millennia, standing stones and graves and all of that sort of thing. But, the Hoff out at Brownsville, we pointed out then that, hey, that's a place that is becoming a new sacred center. And what you're doing out in the woods is sort of sort of the mobile, somewhat more transient, but not insignificant expression of that same idea. You're making a place which one could argue is already holy, and you're recognizing the holiness of that place with an altar, a carving, a spelling out of letters or runes or whatever it may be. So I think it's a great idea. There's a little place that Sheila and I went to. We were in Yosemite Valley there, and one of the first places that we came to is right off of the roadside. You know, you kind of pull off there, and there was a small pool, which by itself was not particularly noteworthy, but immediately on the far side of that was a tree trunk that was tightly wound, a spiral, you know, a diameter of something like this, but it just very symmetrical, very smooth, very regular spiral. Obviously, something remarkable with that tree. And you could call it energy, you can call it whatever you want. But it was clear that other people were also impressed, because they would come along and they left little offerings of flowers and stuff right there by that little pool, by that pond. Yeah, it was already obviously a special place, but people recognize that and respond to that. It speaks to something in our hearts and in our minds. So I think you're spot on with that. Yeah.
I did. Thank you. And there's what's that? The interesting thing is that I think we've gotten caught up with online, with the internet, as far as it's a great information highway. It's unfortunately having a lot more tolls and monitoring put into it these days, but it still exists. But at the end of the day, it doesn't require a lot to post something. Maybe to think up a long, worked out, edited, and thought out dissertation. But by and large, just posting something doesn't require a lot. So you can't necessarily always expect that there's going to result in a lot. We definitely want to use it for means of communication and for broadening, but many times you can lose track of how important doing things in real life can be. You could send something out into the internet that would get more people viewing it than an altar built on a trail on a hill would probably ever be seen, until the wind and rain eventually washes it away, or someone, disrespectfully throws it aside. But the quality of what went into that is what we really, I think, would speak to people. And at the end of the day, even if 3 people see it, what have you done? It has done something for you. You hiked, you went into the wilderness, you spent some time in ritual, and you come away from that both physically and spiritually rejuvenated. And so at the end of the day, it's going to help at least one person, which, if you're taking care of yourself, that's the most important person there is. Right.
And you're living your faith. You're actually living it. You're not just reading a book about it, and you're not even talking about other people with it. You're experiencing it. You're there experiencing real life. And actually, before the show started, we were having that conversation about technology. Its good points and its bad points, and I think the artificiality of it is something that is very detrimental to our spiritual lives in many ways. Really great book.
No, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, I said no. I agree. Go ahead.
No. Really great book I read years ago. I love showing people books I read, but I don't have that one at me because it just now occurred to me, called The Absence of the Sacred, or In the Absence of the Sacred. And it talks about exactly that subject. And it's subtitled something like, the American Indian nations or some such stuff. But that's BS, because he hardly even talks about the Indians in the book. He talks about everybody. He talks about Norwegians, and he points out how few Norwegians there are, and how things like Disney World make basically a mockery of any culture that it touches. And the idea of something being sacred because of its purity, of its essential sense of belonging and so forth, that's just been thrown away. And I think that's one of the, I love the things technology can do, abso-freaking-lutely, but there's some real issues with it as well, obviously.
I think that's an excellent point when it comes to the lack of sacred. If you look at the world by and large these days, there's very little considered sacred. And to be honest, some of the only things that are considered sacred are things that either are backed up by a great population of people that deem it sacred, or a sizable number of people who will enact violence upon you for quote unquote blaspheming what they consider sacred. Everything else that doesn't have such drastic measures applying to validate its sanctity are fair game for a corporate entity like Disney to make money out of it as they see fit, and because that's their real god.
Yes, yeah, money and power. Yeah, and they've got plenty of both. And they're not on our side. They're not on our side. To quote George R.R. Martin in one of his books, said, "Well, the rich and the powerful will always seek to further solidify their riches and their power." Yes. I don't know that author. Tell me about this person. Oh, that's he wrote the Song of Ice and Fire. They made the television program Game of Thrones out of it. Awesome. Okay. All right. Yeah, there it is. Good information to have. Yeah. Now you've participated in the Wotan on the Peaks experience, as I recall. Yes, I had. It was quite an experience. Had not occurred to me at the time yet to build an altar, so I look forward to doing another one with you, Elder McNallen, and we can build an altar on the mountain somewhere. Yes, absolutely. It'll be great fun. I don't know. I think there's a good chance there's some people out there who aren't familiar with that. And if they look over my shoulder, they'll see one of the banners that we typically use. Wotan on the Peaks is kind of along the lines that we've been talking about. I took the title from Julius Evola's book, Meditations on the Peaks. And he wrote that book, but partly out of worry that because of technical improvements, scientific improvements in mountain climbing and so forth over the decades, that mountain climbing would become just another technical thing, another bit of, getting the absolute best pitons and the best shoes and the blah, 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 blah. And he didn't want to lose that spiritual element that the ancients had. Because, after all, their techniques were very limited and they didn't have access to high places so easily, hence the idea of, the gods dwelling on the mountain peaks. I think it was important to resacralize that, but also to use that specifically as a religious as well as a, shall we say, metapolitical event, and to summon the might and the wisdom of Wotan from the mountaintops and invoke his might for the success of our people, for the well-being of our people, for the evolution and the victory of our people. And I think that's gotten a pretty decent amount of response. And certainly we're open to doing a lot more. Maybe some of our listeners out there would be interested in doing that. If so, they can obviously contact me at WolfAgeMedia. The whole idea is that it is a sacrifice. It is a bloat. The sacrifice that we give to Wotan is our sweat, our effort, our trudging up the hill, our exertion, our discomfort. Even in some cases, you get some blisters, you throw a little pain in there. That's our sacrifice. And we get it to the top. We make the invocation with a horn full of mead. We pour our offering to Wotan and typically share a horn ourselves. So this is somewhat of the same idea. It is going into a natural place, communing with the holy powers in that place, and in the case of Wotan on the Peaks, actually applying that in a very deliberate way as a spiritual, religious, metapolitical, and one might even say political act. It's, broad spectrum. So that's one of the things I've been involved with and still am involved with. So anyone interested in that, please feel free to check us out. There is actually a Wotan network update that takes care of that sort of thing over on Facebook. It's not being maintained so well or so intensely these days since I'm a little bit absent over there on Facebook, but that's okay. I think Sheila's going to help out with it. But anyway, and so on that goes. But again, that idea of nature, that idea of connecting with nature, I'm not really fond of the hippie-esque sort of phrase, like, I'm like one with nature, man. No, it's understand. No, nature is not your buddy. Nature is a harsh school, and it is a school that will kill you if you make a mistake. But hey, nature's law, tooth and claw.
Right. But there is a great amount of love, I think, in there, and that people can take from that, because that's something I found in my time seeking solace, was that nature, there is no evil in nature. No real evil. The only evil I think you could find in nature is perhaps in viruses. And one could even make the argument that they are required to maintain balance. It's a necessary evil, if you will. There is very little in nature that has the power to completely destroy its not, I mean, perhaps its own ecosystem, yes, but not the overall and complete realm. So there's a great love in that, because there's checks and balances definitely built into it. And if the more, in the gooder, in the better part of technology, one of its attributes has been that we're able to use that to understand a little better. For instance, we've been able to figure out the trees and roots actually communicating with one another, the higher levels of animal communication that we had, long since disregarded. But it's funny, because nature has always been that way, and technology is only now telling us. Many of us have always known this, or many of us had always accepted it. But now it seems to, by and large, becoming more popular knowledge, because technology is backing it up. But if you look at these are things, the lore, that folk tales and old stories had been iterating and reiterating for generations and generations. We're only now thinking it's not ridiculous because we've got a computer telling us it's accurate.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you're right. We are learning that nature is infinitely more complex and interesting and profound in every sense than we dreamed. It really is. I mean, with so much we don't know yet about the natural world and about consciousness and how our consciousness relates to that. And it obviously does. There's a field of common interest there that comes together. We've yet to really scratch the surface on any of that. There's so much yet to come. So I know that you're very interested also in fitness type things. I'm hearing about intense workouts that you do. And I know you're always on the front edge of that. Could you share a little bit of that with us?
Certainly. So my experiences in my time abroad had taught me the importance of maintaining physical readiness and maintaining tactical and situational awareness, because things can change at a dime. And when I came to this, to Asatru, I had been seeking out others of less like-mindedness, because once I started reading the Havamal and I started coming to a better appreciation of the lore, that one doesn't even have to go through the prose or poetic Edda combined. They could go through the first several chapters of each, and it becomes pretty apparent to you fairly quickly that there's definitely an importance upon physical and tactical readiness. And in the uncertainty of today's world, that's even more so. Because while we think, yes, there is a relative safety and comfort that we work and we try to reinforce both physically and virtually, for lack of a better expression, but all that can evaporate in a major catastrophe, and in as little as a car accident or as a vehicle breaking down on a long road trip. And certainly we're seeing it now in the changing of the political spectrum. People can, throw out the acceptable politenesses and courtesies at a whim, because they feel that, oh, well, you don't think like I do, and therefore that gives me all the grounds I need to enact violence upon you. And then we see that's becoming more and more common, the necessity to always, be without, to never be without your sword. Unfortunately, we're not really allowed to carry swords everywhere we go. Have them all. Stanza 38 talks about how, a man, the Henry Adams Bellows translation, I'm paraphrasing slightly, but, a man should set not a foot upon the road without his spear, for he has no knowledge of when he may need it. So, don't be walking about without your weapons, because you don't have any idea when you might need them. Unfortunately, you can't be carrying, today's spears and swords or handguns and rifles. But while it's, in some countries it's a right, and in others it is completely not. And there, even within those countries where it is a right, it's still restricted. So one has to then look at, okay, well, what's the one thing they can't, at least at this level, outlaw? They can't outlaw your arms and your legs and your mind. So you need to harness those as your weapons. You need to create those as your weapons. And when those are your weapons, no matter where you go, they're never going to run out of ammo. And, as long as your heart can beat strong to support them, and you're never going to put them down and forget about them. At least we haven't got to the Terminator stage yet. So, but so
Yeah.
the importance of that then spoke, taking that, I started running with that concept in doing tactical training and martial arts. I feel that's very important, because that's the one way you truly can turn your mind and your body into at least in some capacity. You'll have some type of weapon with you, even if you do not have an actual firearm. And of course, firearms training is important as well. But in the world being the way it is these days, many people do not have or even are permitted to have readily accessible firearms. So you go to the next step. Bladed weapons, you go to the next step after that, your own body. One of the big things, though, with martial arts is that there's a lot of very Zen martial arts out there. And those are respectful, I feel. There's a great deal you can learn from them. But I think if you look at the rise of mixed martial arts as a platform since the early 90s, it really speaks to the validity of someone being able to, accomplish, striking, with the fists, elbows, knees, and shins, to being able to wrestle for position, to being able to grapple on the ground. These are how you make yourself a weapon and are able to carry your weapons with you at all times. And be that from, hey, I know how to do a couple of strikes and I can wrestle a little bit, to, I am a licensed professional fighter with 20 wins and 2 losses, and my hands and feet in some states, it sounds very like a Chuck Norris joke, but it's true. There are some states who have you are a registered deadly weapon because you're a professional fighter. They consider your arms and your legs as registered deadly weapons. So we all obviously are not all going to be able to achieve that way. That is not the path for us all. There are philosophers, and there are carpenters and skills tradesmen amongst us. But every man and woman should be able to defend themselves. And when I say defend themselves, I don't mean that, oh yeah, I'm a tough person, I can take a punch, I can throw a punch. No, do you actually know how to throw more than 2 different types of punches? Do you actually know how to throw a proper kick? Do you know how to take a kick? Do you know how to get up with someone on top of you that has 50 pounds more than you? Do you know how to move yourself in a position when you have a person on top of you so that your head isn't taking blows and getting bounced off the ground? Do you know how, if you are pinned against a wall, how to trip, how to move, how to reverse that position? These are things, not the, oh, I'm a tough guy in a bar fight. It's great. You can be a tough guy in a bar fight. That's awesome. And if you are a tough guy in a bar fight, you're going to be even a tougher guy in a bar fight if you have some actual training behind you to back that up. That's where I really feel. And one thing that I've found in my time is that there is a lot of talk of hailing tier and talk of fighting in the shield wall. And that's good if you're actually doing it. But there's a lot of talk of this things until it comes time to do tier training and shield wall preparing. And then there's always that achy back or that swollen ankle or that, just not feeling it today. Well, you're not going to have a say if someone attacks you. You're not going to have a say. You're not going to choose when and where your enemy acts upon you. That's, Sun Tzu's, that's, the principles of Sun Tzu. You don't get to choose the battlefield very often, and you certainly don't often get to choose your enemy. He'll choose those two things. So if he's going to choose those two things, you better have you have a lot of say on the third option, which is being prepared to defend. Unless you are the predator, when you are preyed upon, you have to choose what your response is to the attack and the timing. You don't get to choose the first two. So you better have the preparation down.
Right.
So one of the things I really encourage, and because we are drawn to that in Asatru, many people, whether they feel it's an archetype to follow or it's actual the divine, that they really take after the warrior ethics and the warrior mentality of it, and that's wonderful. But the sanctity of that is only carried on generation to generation if you pour into it. It is not a well that you can just draw water from without pouring water back into it. And the pouring of the water back into it is in your own training and in the training of others.
Okay. Spoiler alert for all of the people listening out there. I participated in one of your workouts once.
I do
recall that.
I remember. I do remember that. It was a good time. You were just before your birthday, so none of the young bucks who decided to this really wasn't what they were up to, or they didn't have an excuse. You have a gentleman only a few years older, of course, out there doing.
Only a few times older than some of them.
Yeah, more like 3 times some of their age. So there's no excuse unless you unless you have a real credible medical issue.
Good, and I just kind of want to outline it for our audience because I think they'd get a kick out of it. No pun intended. I dressed out and I don't remember. We formed up and started off with kind of a gentle jog, and we ran along for a while. Then we ran down this road into some low terrain, and then we ran back up the hill, down the hill all the way, and then we got a little bit of a downhill slope, and we went down to one of the buildings that were on the property there. And I don't know, we probably did some calisthenics. Did we do anything like that, or did we just move straight in?
We did. We did some calisthenics where we started getting into some pad work.
Right. And, I highly recommend pad work and bag work for people that haven't done it. It's a great introduction, I think, to this sort of thing. There's a psychological thing that goes along with that. And if you haven't done any, I'm just speaking for myself here and just telling you the way it is with me, for a guy who hadn't done anything at all like that in a long time, and who was not comfortable with the idea of bag striking and so forth in front of a lot of other people. Guys, you got to get over it. You've got to face the fact that, none of us out there are perfect. Everybody's going to look a little silly at one point or another. And the way to beat that is just to get out there, get on those gloves, and start to work. People will help you. People that are your instructors and your coworkers are not your enemy. They are your friends. They are your potential comrades in arms. So, Get out there, beat that pad down. I go down to the gym now, and I'm much more comfortable with, I'll do my main workout, and then I'll slip on some light gloves, and I'll hit the heavy bag for a while. It's awesome for cardio. It is the quickest freaking cardio exercise you're ever going to get, man. A couple of 3 minutes of that, and you can feel it. So I just want to say to everybody listening, if you're not doing something like this, you're really missing something. Find some friends, find somebody who knows what to do that can kind of give you some guidance, and just do it. Just do it. And you'll feel a lot better afterwards. Good stuff. Highly recommended.
Yeah, excellent. I think we can. I love how you hit the nail on the head when it comes to speaking. What that does to you on a spiritual level, because it really transcends, the different paradigms, and in that, if you get together with a couple, if you're blessed to be near, fellow Asatru or fellow Wotanists, and you get together and you train together, you have two things. If you don't know something, those are the people, if they truly care about you, then everyone's ego gets put on, it gets suspended, and you train together. You train together, you build one another up. If someone's doing something wrong, then you can teach that person, even if between the four of you, or however many there be, there's very little knowledge, you can build your knowledge together. And even, no matter how small it is, it's still something. And there is a real esoteric bonding and empowerment by going out there and training together. Because yes, this may not be, a going off into the fields to fight to the death, but it doesn't have to be that to still be valid. And you can still come away from that going, this was a sacrifice to Tyr. This is a sacrifice to Thor. This was our sweat that we put into this, taking away our time to feel some discomfort, to come away a little bit improved and a little bit sharper and a little bit more agile, a little bit more focused, and in company of good, brothers and sisters of the faith. And if that doesn't build you up and bring about some real white pilling joy to your life, then I don't know if there's much else in this world that can.
I totally agree with that. Set aside the ego. You're so right. To me, that's just the key of getting started. Set aside the ego. Get out there. If you make a fool of yourself, nobody cares. No, it's like getting out on the dance floor, which was the hardest thing I ever did in my life. Much harder. But seriously, I can't even describe it. but it's that idea. Get the ego out of the way. Get the ego out of the way and become that person you can be. I know it sounds like a cliche or an ad for a self-realization course, but it's true. And if the day ever comes that you are putting your ass on the line and you may or may not come back alive, then better to take a few of them with you than just crumble. At least die like the person you were meant to be. Or, well, for that matter, how about living like the person you were meant to be? So on it goes.
Exactly. To quote Patton, no war who was ever won by dying for your country. You win by making the other. We'll skip a couple lines here, but you win by making the other guy die for his. So
absolutely,
yeah, it definitely goes about saying that having some skills will get you a lot further. Well, it isn't always guaranteed to make you see the end, but it'll certainly keep you from crumpling in the beginning.
Yes, absolutely. So what do you think about, let me just toss out some names. In regards to this concept and the things we're talking about now, what do you think of, say, the Golden One?
Big fan. Big fan. The biggest reasons is that he is covering things on multiple levels. He's not just out there putting up a bunch of weights and going, yes, my biceps are looking very juicy. And when he has, I'm pretty sure people can, get that he's, just not taking himself too seriously, which is, good. A little humor can go a long way to keep the blood pressure down. But he's doing that. He's doing he's following his combatives training. He's actually fought in sanctioned MMA. I like that he's definitely bringing in the philosophy and the study and the reading, because you can be the most physically gifted specimen. You can, you can lose 150 pounds and be the most in shape you've ever been of your life, but it still pales to what the mind can achieve. And the fact that he is a father. He's not just out there talking about, warrior this, warrior that. He's caring about the most important of all facets of our faith, and that he is someone who is, protecting and enabling and empowering those in the present, and he's also creating the future. So I have granted, I understand that, who someone is online could be totally different than how they are in their day-to-day life. But from what I have, from what I know of him and what I've read of him and what I've, even learned from him a bit, I'm a very big fan of what he's putting forth.
Yeah, I'm impressed by him. I'm also impressed by his. I mean, he can make fun of himself. And there's this sort of narcissistic thing that goes on, and he's camping it up. This is just his way of lowering the stress level and not taking himself as seriously as one might think he was. He takes his work seriously. He takes the person he wants to become seriously. But he's just in the old days, he would have been a good drang. He would have been, a good shipmate, a good guy next to you, not just because he's big, but because he's a cool guy and he can crack a joke under pressure. All of those things, and that's valuable. Okay, how about Wolves of Vinland? What do you think of Wolves of Vinland?
Wolves of Vinland, and I'm just them, or I'm assuming this also applies to like Operation Werewolf.
Yeah, that whole cluster of things right there.
So I have some differences with some of their concept, with I guess their philosophies, but by and large, I think they're doing a lot of good. Any person who stands up and says, "Look, in today's world, it's better for a young man to go out in the woods, climb a mountain, do some shadow boxing, go to the gym, do some weights, go read some of the works of the great minds. Don't be running around wasting time, abusing alcohol, looking at porn, and just being and succumbing to the depression and the black pill. There is a lot of good in the alternatives, out there. Some of those are easier to get away from than others. It is, there are the man just feeling down about the current state of the realm, and there is the clinical and chemical imbalance that leads to problems within one's own mind. But people are at various levels between that. I'm not saying that going and hiking is going to cure you of clinical depression. Maybe it does for some people. I don't think that's. I'm not personally on the board that is the only cure. There are cases that do require definite medical attention, but by and large, for the I guess the smaller levels of just degeneracy that can seep into your life, or that you can just find yourself falling into. The answers to that, and as far as the constructive responses to that, which I've just listed, are really good. Like I said, do have some differences with their approach to some things, but I'm not here to be well, I like this part and I don't like that part. I think by and large, it's a good message. It's a good thing to do. And it does encourage, like I said, it is encouraging young men to and women too, to seek their higher self and not just be another, brick in the wall, like Pink Floyd said.
Right. So do you see groups like this as sort of a modern Männerbund?
I do actually. I do. I think that's the direction it's going in, because because the people that are taking part in this are either, I think, just from personal experience, are one of two types. And there's obviously many types, but the broader types are those that just never fit into what is, I guess, the quote unquote norm, or what the status quo of society is, or those who lived in that and then just, one thing led to another, and they just gradually woke up to the knowledge that this can't be it, or this isn't it, because this is wrong, or this isn't enough, or this is just inefficient and inconsequential. I mean, the latest, created artificial celebrity and all that, the goings on of this particular person, that's not who you really want to idolize yourself to be. There needs to be more than that. And so you seek those other people out. We are a social being. And more often than not, we like to think that, oh, I don't care what other people think, and I'm above what other people's opinions of me are. Okay, and that may be true, but if you look in the mirror, you're very often than not above who that person thinks, of you. So you want to do right by yourself, and so you seek out other people to build upon that, to build a common foundation and a common core that allows you to find your better self.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think I see a lot of these organizations and this sort of general tendency as being essentially, male initiatory organizations. We don't really have that, except things like military service, which for many men serves that sort of function. But I think that when it's done in a way that has a sort of spiritual implications and this broader thing, I think it's really, really effective. I think it's a very good thing.
Agreed, because if you look back at history, that's how it had been done for a very, very long time. And we're at a unique level right now where there are more young men being raised in single homes, being raised in single homes by a single mother than we've ever seen. There are more female teachers. The Boy Scouts of America have completely collapsed as far as a credible organization, and they're no longer teaching the father figure, older brother teachings that we had. And you're right, there's coming of age and a growth into manhood. Those types of things aren't being done. I mean, we literally have companies out there that are trying to use the evisceration of masculinity as their advertising platform, for goodness sake. So yeah, there really is a lack of this. So in answer to that, I think you are seeing pockets and enclaves of people popping up that are acting upon the traditions, which I think are the best way to go. There are those that are just acting to do the complete opposite just for the sake of being contrarians, and there's some good to that. But I feel that no, at one point we came to this place because we fell away from something that actually taught something that was empowering. And the lack of individual empowerment in this day and age, I think is it's no coincidence that that's also that's connected to just on a social and political level, entities that do not wish for people to be empowered as individuals, especially people like us.
Yes. I think it's an essential component of a healthy society that we haven't had it in a formal sense in a very long time. But as I was saying a couple minutes ago, the military and things of that sort of been similar enough to where that coming of age happens. But I love the idea of ritualizing it, of putting young men through ordeals, separating them out. It's the traditional sociological thing, the separation, ordeal, and then reintegration into the larger society.
Agreed, and that
at the same.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and the only caution is that we need to consciously understand and to transmit the idea that the warrior at that point becomes not a society in himself. He becomes the defender of the larger society, with that basic function of protection and service, and and reintegration into the whole, sort of.
Agreed. And actually, I'm glad you said that first, because I want to build upon that. And it doesn't just apply to warriors. I mean, we do get a little hung up, and they are idolized and gloried. But go back 75 years. It's a Norman Rockwell painting. The boy in the mechanic shop learning how to fix this part of the engine from his father. The young fellow out there on the lake learning how to bait a hook from his grandfather. The young girl who's learning a skill from her mother. And be they whatever it is, it doesn't always have to be pick up your sword and shield, and we're going to learn to fight today. It could just be, here's a chisel and here's a hammer, and we're going to carve something. Here is an anvil, and here is a hammer again, and we're going to bend this lump of metal is going to be something useful or something beautiful when we're done with it. And when you have a society that doesn't have that connection of skill one to the other, that's another whole conversation of itself of where that's going to end up going, but it's nowhere good.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely agree with you. We've been talking about it in terms of something that's fairly structured, and we've been talking about warriors, but it's, as you just pointed out, these other things are the same function. It's the same stuff that's going on there, the same knowledge that's being transmitted. It's a transgenerational thing, and we tend to lose a lot of that these days. It's every generation feels like it's the only one that matters. We've got the old geezers that, not somewhere, there must be some old geezers somewhere who think they know it all, and those damn young whippersnappers, they don't know anything. Why, when I was a young man, and blah blah blah, etc. ad nauseum. And then you've got the kids who think they know it all too, and you've got everything in between. And there's got to be that sense of a transgenerational unity, which is why I'm not particularly fond of boomer jokes. I mean, as I stated somewhere recently, I was fighting communists before they were born, on many fronts, ideological and whatever. Oh, okay. Are we having fun? We don't want to quit, do we? We got a few more minutes there, Dave. Or can you hang out with us a little bit longer? Okay, bro.
You could always cut this into two parts. I'm not challenged for time, by the way, Elder McNallen. So if you want to cut this into two parts, you're more than welcome.
Let's do that. This has been awesome. I think that we can continue this another time, and we can. And let's tantalize our listeners just a little bit and talk about some of the things that we'd be dealing with. Okay. Obviously, we can elaborate on any of these themes. We can hypothesize what a functioning society might look like. That would be an interesting exercise, and how that would be consistent with our history, with our spiritual beliefs, and with our needs for the future. We can talk about, we were touching on philosophy and just in our casual conversation before this whole thing.
And the greater role of capacity. And I'd like to
come back to some of that. So
yeah, the greater roles of capacity and the challenges it will face, and with the rise of technology and machine automation and robotics.
Yes, man against machine. Whoa. Yes. Yeah, good stuff. Because whole other thing, but yes, let's go there next time, because it seems to me that our people, all people, but I'm mostly concerned about our people. Our people have an existential threat in some of the technology that is facing us, and the ends to which that technology will be put by the people that think they're global masters. Sound good?
Sounds excellent.
All right. Well, Will, thank you so much. This has been a lot of fun. Thanks again for being the ultimate producer and the guy who keeps us out of trouble and wipes our noses. The old veteran there. Will, thanks much. We'll see you again next time. It'll be so much easier on the coordination this next time. It'll be so smooth. Dave, thank you very much. All your listeners out there, thank you for taking part in this. Sorry this couldn't have been live in quite the way we wanted it, but hey, things happen, and we drive on. Again, like this subscription thing, support us, support all these things we do. Tell your friends, because people need to hear the ideas that we're spreading. Good? Okay. Well, good night, everybody.
Good night. Thank you.